Any question anyone would like to ask? देखो मेरी पार्कर फोले see broadly, because generally broadly if you categorize, C will be considered within the neoclassical, but say typically C is not considered either in the classical or in the neoclassical. C is considered to be a link between the two. Why it is so? Because say, when we'll take up, we'll understand that better, but since he has raised a question, let me say, Mary Parker Foley, when she was writing her theory, in terms of the time period, she belonged to the period when these classical theories were developing their theories, or these classical theories were more, influential. So in terms of the time period, she belonged to which era? Classical. But when you try to understand the content of her theory, she was very futuristic. Her theory carried ideas those were about to come by this future theorist that we are tagging as humanistic. But these humanistic theorists were influenced more by Elton Mayo's work, less by Foley's work. Because Foley's work, many of these did not read. They read much later. So that is why, see, many a time we say, this also, few things, let's get general things get clarified. Don't write. Tomorrow onwards you have to write a lot. Don't write. We say Woodrow Wilson is the father of public administration. We don't say Kautilya is the father of public administration. Chanakya. Chanakya has written an outstanding book. What is the name? Arthashastra. A classic. Outstanding. With regard to the statecraft, this is a very, very rich text. So Woodrow Wilson, he was basically there in the second half of the 19th century. So thereby, Kautilya came first, or this Wilson? But Wilson is referred to as father of public administration. Pardon? He wrote the first paper, study of administration. Prior to that, many papers has been written. He also became the president of America later on. No, actually, see, that's a separate thing. Many questioned that he being this or that, the tag was given. No, I'm referring to something else. If you say father means someone who has initiated this discipline. Discipline means what? A systematic and continuous study. Systematic and continuous. Kautilya's work was a beautiful work. Confucius, you know this name? A Chinese philosopher, a very learned philosopher. His work is an amazing work on statecraft. There are many other philosophers who had also written very nice text on administration, government, the functioning of the government, much earlier, but none of these were credited as the father of public administration. Because the moment you say father, initiator of a discipline, that means discipline is what? As I will repeat, is a systematized as well as a continuous study, regular study. Systematic, continuous, institutionalized study. That means it is imparted in schools, colleges and all this. Arthashastra was written such a nice book, but it did not result into what? A continuous study, regular study. So ultimately, who became influential in influencing the initiation and continuation of this discipline? Wilson. So even though Kautilya was earlier, Confucius was earlier, Many other theorists, they were much earlier. They were not credited as being the father or initiator. So similarly, here, if you take into account Mary Parker Foley, her ideas in terms of content, those were neoclassical. But she is not included in this because the neoclassical school of thought that came up primarily was influenced by Elton-Mayo, and subsequent theorists, they did refer to Foley, but somewhat later. So this school of thought that started, that somehow excluded Foley. Her theory carried humanistic content, but she did not fall into the humanistic school. Are you able to distinguish the two? Her theory carried those characters. That we'll study. Broadly, generally I am introducing few things, but she herself was not included into this school because in terms of period she belongs to classical era, and her ideas were taken up much later. Her ideas were enriched ideas, but it was studied and appreciated much later.